My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 28 years old, and I still remember the exact moment I knew I'd never forget what my cousin said about my husband. It was my wedding day. I stood under a pale blue sky in a modest white dress I'd bought on sale, holding the calloused hand of the man I loved more than anyone in the world. The air smelled like pine and lemon cake. Our friends clapped as we kissed. But just as we started walking back down the aisle, hand in hand, I heard Derek's voice behind me, low smirking, and full of that smug superiority he had mastered since high school. Didn't know janitors came with wedding packages now, he muttered to his date loud enough for me to catch it. She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all day. I didn't flinch. I kept walking. I smiled for photos, raised my champagne glass, and even danced to the cheesiest 80s songs with my new husband, Ethan Carter. But inside, something had cracked. Not just because of what Derek said, but because deep down, I knew others were thinking the same thing. I saw the forced smiles, the side eyes, the way some of my relatives avoided making eye contact during the reception. They didn't get it. They didn't get him. And they definitely didn't get us. I met Ethan when I was 23, fresh out of college, working the late-night front desk at the university library, while trying to save for a master's degree I wasn't even sure I wanted. He came in quietly every night around 11 p.m., wearing a plain gray uniform and pushing a squeaky cleaning cart. Most people barely looked at him. I noticed everything, the way he always replaced the trash liner even if it wasn't full, how he adjusted crooked chairs and dusted the tops of shelves that no one ever saw, how he nodded politely at students even when they ignored him. There was something grounded about Ethan, something real, like he carried a whole invisible world on his shoulders and never once complained about the weight. He asked me out after 3 months of small talk over mops and overdue book returns. Our first date was tacos and a long walk through Riverfront Park. We talked about childhood, about struggle, about why neither of us had any illusions about perfect futures. He told me he'd dropped out of high school to take care of his younger brothers after their dad left. I told him about my parents, my dad a retired mechanic with arthritic hands, and my mom a high school teacher who still graded papers by hand every Sunday. Ethan never pretended to be more than what he was. That's what made me fall for him. So when we got engaged, I was over the moon. He proposed on a hiking trail, slipping a simple gold ring onto my finger with a shaky hand and a tear in his eye. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't Instagrammable. It was us. But the moment we shared the news with my extended family, the comments started. "Oh, wow, good for you," said my aunt with a voice that dripped with surprise like honey. "Wait, you mean like—" "A janitor," one of my cousins asked. "Like, with the card and the gloves and everything." Even my mom hesitated when I told her. "Claire, are you sure you want that kind of life?" she asked gently. "You've worked so hard. You deserve someone more stable." Stable Ethan worked harder than half the men in that banquet hall combined. He didn't have a trust fund or a pedigree, but he showed up every single day for people who didn't even know his name. And when I got sick with the flu for a week, he brought soup to my apartment at 4 a.m., just so it'd be hot when I woke up. But Derek, oh, Derek was the worst. He's always been the golden boy of our family. Slick haircut MBA from UW, a job at some consulting firm in Seattle with a name that sounds like a pharmaceutical company, but probably just sells spreadsheets. He drives a black Audi, wears loafers without socks, and thinks quoting Elon Musk counts as personality. He's my mom's sister's son, which means we saw each other at every holiday, every family barbecue, and now, apparently at my wedding. I pretended not to hear his comment that day. I said nothing. Ethan didn't hear it either, thank God. He was too busy helping his elderly grandma find a shady spot to sit in before the music started. But the words lingered, like a grease stain that never fully comes out. It didn't matter that Ethan had spent months helping me plan the wedding on a shoestring budget, that he worked double shifts the week before so I wouldn't have to worry about the caterer, that he fixed the broken leg on one of the reception tables himself the morning of. All that mattered to Derek and his kind was a title. To them, I'd married a janitor. To me, I'd married a builder. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, is that Ethan and I had a plan, a real one. We'd been working on it since long before the wedding. Quietly, relentlessly. He didn't just clean offices, he studied them. He knew how much time it really took to clean a 20-desk firm versus a co-working space. He tracked what products worked best and what schedules clients preferred. He had notes, formulas, projections, stuff Derek would probably scoff at if he saw them in a spiral notebook instead of a spreadsheet. And I had the business degree, the project management chops, the drive. Together, we weren't just a janitor and his wife. We were a startup, a two-person dream, a future no one else could see yet. 3 years later, that same cousin who laughed at my wedding now wears a uniform with our company name embroidered on it. He clocks in at 6 a.m., takes orders from our shift managers, and uses the exact same mop Ethan started out with. The only difference, Ethan owns the building. People always assume you grow up surrounded by people who want the best for you. That may be true for some, but in my family, wanting the best often meant one thing: looking the part. We weren't wealthy by any means. My dad was a mechanic who came home smelling like oil and metal every night. My mom taught English at the local high school grading essays while heating up frozen lasagna. We lived in Spokane, Washington, in a modest 3-bedroom house with peeling paint on the porch and a swing that groaned whenever the wind blew too hard. But we had love, and books, and grit. Still being the first to go to college came with unspoken expectations. I got a scholarship to Gonzaga, studied business administration, and worked part-time all through school library assistant barista, even pet-sitting for one summer. I was practical, efficient, ambitious. I was supposed to become someone. I think that's why people, especially my extended family, were so thrown off when I ended up with Ethan. We met in the least romantic way possible. I was pulling a late shift at the university library, grumbling about a broken copy machine when he appeared quietly like he always did. He bent down, opened the bottom panel, poked around, and within 2 minutes had it working again. "Temporary fix," he said, brushing toner off his hands. "You'll still want maintenance to look at it tomorrow." I blinked at him. "Wait, you're not maintenance, nope. Night janitor. But I used to fix copiers in high school." He left without another word. That was Ethan in a nutshell. Helpful, observant, and unbothered by whether you noticed or not. Over time, we began having small passing conversations. He'd share odd trivia about cleaning chemicals. I'd tell him about my accounting exams. We both liked deadpan jokes and cheap diner food. I learned he had 2 younger brothers who lived with his mom in North Spokane, and he worked nights to help pay for one of their therapy sessions. He'd dropped out of school to start working when their dad bailed and never looked back. I admired him, not in the way you admire a war hero or a TED Talk speaker. I admired how consistent he was. No fluff, no ego. Just a man who did his job well quietly while the rest of the world overlooked him. We started dating the summer after I graduated. It wasn't flashy. He didn't have a car, so we took the bus. Our splurge nights were pizza and a $1.99 movie rental. But I was happy. I remember telling my mom about him. Her response was hesitant, not cruel, just cautious. "Honey," she said over the phone, "he sounds kind. But is this just a phase A phase, as if stability and kindness were passing trends?" When I brought Ethan to Christmas dinner the first year we were together, I watched my family react like we'd walked in with a science experiment. My cousin Danielle whispered, "Wait, is that the janitor guy?" loud enough for me to hear. Derek didn't even pretend. He looked Ethan up and down, then turned back to his phone. "Claire," he said that night after dinner, "you could have done better. Like, at least someone in IT or something. Ethan's not a placeholder." I said steady but cold. I didn't say he was. Derek replied, that smirk playing on his face. "I'm just saying, you're a Bennett." People watch us. That line stuck with me for months. People watch us. I suppose he wasn't wrong. We were the family with the graduation banners, the wedding albums, the LinkedIn success stories. My brother was in real estate. My older cousin married a surgeon. And here I was, dating a janitor who rode the bus and packed peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. But none of that mattered when Ethan was beside me. He saw me, not just the polished version. He noticed when I bit my nail during stressful calls. He knew how I preferred the smell of lemon cleaner to floral candles. He never made fun of my spreadsheets or mocked my color-coded grocery lists. By the time we got engaged, I didn't hesitate for a second. He proposed with a simple gold band, stammered halfway through his speech, and dropped the ring once. I said yes before he even asked the full question. He didn't have much money, but what he gave me was full of heart of steadiness of truth. Our wedding was small intentionally. Backyard setting, string lights, a buffet catered by a friend who owed Ethan a favor. I wore my mom's earrings and Ethan wore the only suit he owned. And yet, despite the beauty of the day, I could still feel Derek's words pressing into me like a bruise. I told myself it didn't matter, but I knew it did. Not because I doubted Ethan, but because I knew how hard it would be to prove our love wasn't naive. The day after the wedding, Ethan and I sat on the floor of our tiny apartment eating leftover cake from the box and making a pact. We would build something together, not just a life, but a business, a future, a way to rise quietly, honestly, and on our own terms. We didn't know exactly how yet, but Ethan had an idea, and I had a plan. We just needed to believe in it long enough to prove the rest of them wrong. Starting a business with the person you love sounds romantic in theory. In reality, it's spreadsheets at midnight bickering over vacuum models and wondering if your shared dream is worth the growing pile of bills on your counter. We named our company Everclean Solutions. Ethan came up with it. Because we don't just clean, we reset, he said. I loved the sound of it. Simple, professional, hopeful. The idea was straightforward. Combine Ethan's knowledge of commercial cleaning with my background in operations and management. We'd start small, targeting small law firms, real estate offices, and wellness clinics around Spokane. The plan was to pitch ourselves as boutique, eco-friendly, detail-obsessed. But we didn't have clients, or equipment, or even a car. So we did what any overly ambitious, underfunded couple does: we bootstrapped. We used Ethan's tax return to buy a secondhand floor buffer from Craigslist. I put my emergency savings into uniforms, business cards, and a website that looked halfway decent. We worked nights and weekends building a lead list, cold emailing businesses, and offering free trial cleans. It was exhausting. We argued. Not dramatically, but constantly. I told you not to order that lemon scent again, it leaves streaks. Well, I told you we can't spend $80 on microfiber towels if we don't even have paying clients yet. But beneath the tension was this quiet, fierce belief in what we were doing. Every small win, every reply from a receptionist, every positive Yelp review, every job where we left a space gleaming was fuel. Still, it wasn't enough. One particularly slow month, I caved and called Derek. I hated the idea. Ethan didn't love it either, but we needed funding just enough to cover a van and maybe a full month's worth of supplies. I figured Derek could help. After all, he always loved talking about his investments. I invited him to coffee, presented our business plan on a neat little PDF, and tried to keep it professional. We're not just cleaners, I said. We're building a scalable model focused on efficiency, sustainability, and niche market targeting. We already have 3 recurring clients, and with just $10,000, Derek laughed, loudly. You want me to invest in a mop startup, he snorted. Claire, come on, this isn't Shark Tank. I stayed silent. He flipped through the proposal with mock curiosity. So you're telling me that your husband wants to build $1 million empire with Windex? I looked him in the eye. He's not just my husband. He's the most hardworking person I know. And it's going to work. Derek smiled the way people do when they think you're adorably deluded. He closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. Tell you what, he said, reaching into his coat pocket. Here's a $100 Home Depot gift card. Buy yourselves a new broom. And Claire, when you're ready to do real business, call me. I left without saying a word. Ethan was waiting for me in the car. I didn't say much, just stared out the window and handed him the gift card. He held it for a few seconds, then slowly slid it into the glove compartment. We don't need his money, he said quietly. We'll do this the way we've done everything else, ourselves. But it wasn't just about money anymore. That conversation lit something dark in me. Derek didn't just dismiss our business, he dismissed us. Our work, our effort, our future. And somehow I knew he wasn't alone. We lived in a world where hard work only seemed to matter if it came in a suit, where some jobs earned respect and others earned smirks. I wanted to change that. I needed to. But change doesn't come easy, especially when you're barely making rent and your leads dry up overnight. 2 weeks later, our one semi-consistent client, a chiropractor's office, called to cancel service. Their cousin had started a cleaning company and they wanted to keep it in the family. The irony almost made me laugh. I watched Ethan scrub his hands raw that night on an old utility sink trying to get grout cleaner out from under his nails. We'd spent all day deep cleaning a rental property for less than minimum wage. He didn't complain. He never did. But I saw it, the look of doubt creeping in. "Maybe we pause," he said. "Take a step back. You could go back into project management. I could pick up more shifts. Maybe we weren't cut out for this." It broke something in me to hear that, not because I disagreed, but because I had started to wonder the same thing. We were two tired people scraping together pennies, building something invisible to everyone but ourselves. In the worst part, they were all waiting for us to fail. I didn't cry when we lost that client. I didn't cry when the used floor buffer we bought finally gave up mid-job and nearly tore up a client's tile. I didn't even cry when we had to skip a month of health insurance payments just to keep the lights on. No, I cried the night I overheard my mom on the phone. I was staying with her for a few days while Ethan covered a late-night building clean by himself. I walked down the hall to grab my charger and paused when I heard my name. "She says she's fine," my mom whispered. But honestly, I don't know. I think Claire's in over her head. Ethan's sweet, but he's just a janitor. Silence. Then a response from the other end, probably Aunt Marie. I didn't hear every word, but I heard the phrase wasted potential and it made my stomach twist. I backed away before I could hear more. Before I could break. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, squeaking with every turn. It felt like being 17 again, terrified of disappointing everyone, but unsure how to succeed in a way they would accept. And now, I was 28, still trying. The next day, I drove back home early. Ethan was asleep on the couch, arms folded across his chest, shoes still on a bleach stain on the side of his pants. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another declined payment from the utility company. We were drowning, quietly, slowly, and all I could think about was how Derek would react if we failed. He'd say, "I told you so." He'd smile that smug, performative smile and go back to sipping overpriced cocktails in rooftop bars while the rest of us cleaned his floors. We didn't talk much for the next few days, not because we were fighting, but because we were both lost in our own heads, calculating whether pride was worth this level of exhaustion, whether our dream was just a fantasy in the end. Then came the van. It was a Friday morning. I was packing supplies for a last-minute office job. Ethan had booked an accounting firm that wanted a full weekend clean for their quarterly inspection. It was the kind of gig that could cover our entire rent. I went outside to load the gear. The van was gone, not borrowed, not moved, gone. We called the police, filed a report. The officer was polite but not hopeful. "It's probably been stripped and dumped by now," he said. "These older vans are easy targets." Sorry, that was our only vehicle. Our entire setup, vacuum chemicals, uniforms, even our logo magnets had been in there. I sank to the curb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared down at the oil stain where the van used to be and felt this suffocating stillness settle over me. Ethan stood behind me with his hands in his pockets. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he sat next to me, shoulder to shoulder, and said quietly, "Maybe this is it. Maybe we fold." I shook my head, but I had no words. In that moment, everything we'd built felt like a sandcastle that the tide had just claimed. All the late nights, the tiny victories, the gallons of sweat and faith, it felt like it was never going to be enough. Because dreams unlike Derek's investments didn't come with safety nets. That weekend we stayed home. We canceled the job. I ignored calls. Ethan slept like he hadn't in weeks. And on Sunday, I stared at the wall and asked myself the question I never wanted to face had we made a mistake. Not just with the business, with everything. I thought back to the wedding Ethan in a gray vest, nervous but proud, his hand trembling as he slipped the ring on my finger. And Derek's voice in my ear. Didn't know janitors came with wedding packages now. It wasn't just cruel. It was prophecy. And what scared me most was that maybe, just maybe, he had been right. Maybe I had thrown away my degree, my future, my family's expectations, for a fantasy that couldn't survive real life. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up my old resume. I hadn't updated it in years. I started retyping it from scratch, adding keywords, deleting the business from my experience section altogether, as if it had never happened. And then I got an email. It was from one of our very first clients, a small design firm we'd cleaned for nearly a year earlier. They were expanding and needed regular cleaning services at both their downtown and new satellite office. "We remember the great job you did for us. You still around?" I stared at the message, hands frozen over the keyboard. And I thought, maybe we're not dead yet. I showed Ethan. He blinked at the screen like it was in another language. "Do we have anything left?" he asked. I exhaled. "We've got a mop, 2 uniforms, some all-purpose cleaner, and a lot of rage." He smiled for the first time in days. "Let's clean," he said, "and let's never ask Derek for a damn thing ever again." We showed up to that design firm job on foot. Ethan pushed a plastic tote full of cleaning supplies in a second-hand stroller we'd picked up at Goodwill for $7. I carried the mop over my shoulder like a soldier going into battle. We were tired, embarrassed, and deeply aware of how ridiculous we looked hauling supplies down the sidewalk in Spokane's business district like a couple of scrappy lunatics. But you know what? We showed up. We still had our Everclean polos. They were wrinkled and a little faded, but we wore them with pride. I smiled as we passed the front desk. The receptionist did a double take. I caught a glimpse of us in the glass doors, sweaty, worn down, but somehow still standing. The job was supposed to be a quick one. Disinfect all surfaces, polish the floors, clean the glass partitions, refresh the bathrooms. 3 hours max. But when we got inside, we realized the office had just finished construction, and no deep clean had ever been done. It was filthy. Dust in the ceiling vents. Grout caked with paint residue. Residual adhesive on every single window. I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. We got to work. For 7 hours, we scrubbed every inch of that office. My knees ached. My back screamed. Ethan sliced his finger on a piece of broken tile under a desk. We were dehydrated, dizzy, and at one point had to use their office kitchen soap to keep going. But we didn't stop. When we finished, the place shined. Not just clean enough surgical room clean. The kind of clean that makes people stop mid-step and go, "Wow." The project manager walked through and whistled. "Damn." I was expecting decent. "This looks like a brand new space." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check double what they initially offered. "Consider it a rush bonus," he said, "and expect a call tomorrow from our downtown office." I walked out holding that envelope like it was made of gold. That night, Ethan and I sat on the floor of our tiny apartment splitting a grocery store rotisserie chicken and laughing hysterically. It was the kind of laughter that comes out sideways, part relief, part disbelief, part survival. We paid our internet bill, bought a used vacuum off Facebook Marketplace. I signed up for a free Canva account and redesigned our logo. Ethan rewrote our cleaning checklist and created a basic onboarding manual. We were rebuilding piece by piece. But success isn't a straight line. For every new client we landed, there was another one who ghosted us after a trial. For every week we paid our bills, there was another where we ran short and had to put gas on a credit card. The lowest of all lows came 2 weeks later in the form of an email from our building landlord. Notice of lease termination. 30 days. Apparently, the complex had been sold and was being converted into upscale short-term rentals. We had a month to get out and no savings to land anywhere else. I stared at the screen numb, then forwarded it to Ethan, who didn't respond right away. Later that night, he walked into the kitchen holding 2 mugs of instant coffee, handed me one, and sat down across from me. "Okay," he said. "We need to be smart." I nodded, but something inside me finally cracked. "This is too much," I said. "It's like the universe is laughing at us. Every time we stand up, we get kicked again." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't tell me to be positive or tough it out or believe harder. He just took a long sip and said, "Then maybe we stop trying to stand up. Maybe we crawl until we can walk again." I looked at him. The man who carried our supplies in a baby stroller, who had literally bled into his work, who never once complained when people laughed at his job title. I thought about Derek, about the look on his face when he handed me that Home Depot card, about his sideways smirk at our wedding, about how he, despite all his money status and opinions, had never risked anything for something he believed in. I made a decision right there. We wouldn't fail. Not because we were smarter, not because we had better resources, but because we knew what it felt like to have nothing and still get back up. I pulled up a spreadsheet and started making calls the next morning. Property managers, building supervisors, small business owners. I emailed 78 different companies over the course of 4 days, offering discounted cleanings, trial shifts, bundled service packages. Ethan rebuilt our storage shelving in a friend's garage to store supplies temporarily. We didn't sleep much that month. We moved our stuff into a friend's spare room while we searched for a new apartment. We slept on an air mattress and kept cleaning uniforms hanging from curtain rods. And then it happened. A co-working space we'd cold emailed a startup incubator in downtown Spokane responded. They needed reliable overnight cleaning for 3 floors of shared office space. High traffic, high maintenance, high paying. I pitched our services in person, wore my best blazer, tied my hair back, brought Ethan as my field operations manager. We got the contract, and just like that, the tide began to turn. Winning that downtown contract felt like stepping into a new chapter, but it didn't erase the scars of how we got there. We were still living out of boxes. The air mattress had a slow leak that left us on the floor by morning. Our uniforms smelled like bleach no matter how many times we washed them, and our company van was now a 2004 Honda Element with the back seats ripped out to make space for buckets and vacuums. But we had momentum, and momentum, I've learned, is more valuable than comfort. The co-working job was grueling. 3 floors of offices, 27 bathrooms, 14 kitchenettes, and an ever-rotating cast of caffeine-addicted developers who treated the place like a college dorm. We worked overnight from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. every weekday for 3 months straight. Just the 2 of us. Ethan's knees started to give out. I got tendinitis in both wrists from scrubbing. We invested in knee pads and wrist braces like 2 aging athletes chasing their last shot at the playoffs. We were running on fumes and fear of failure, fear of going backward, fear that one broken vacuum could end everything again. But somehow, we kept going. The best part, word spread. A startup CEO in the building referred us to his wife's yoga studio. A freelance marketing manager passed our name to her real estate firm. Within weeks, we had 5 steady contracts all within the same 4-block radius. It was small, but it was sustainable. We hired our first 2 part-time employees, a single dad named Luis, and a retired woman named Darla who cleaned faster than either of us and listened to crime podcasts while she worked. We bought uniforms for them, not hand-me-downs, new ones with our embroidered logo and their names stitched over the heart. I cried when the order arrived. It wasn't a huge deal to anyone else, but to me, it was a symbol we were building something real, something that didn't just exist in spreadsheets or pipe dreams, something that employed people and did it ethically. We raised our rates, slowly, carefully. Clients didn't flinch. In fact, some even said, "You should charge more." We opened a business account. Ethan stopped doing nightly cleans and moved into a managerial role. I focused on sales strategy and customer retention. We were for the first time no longer just surviving. We were growing. And that's when Derek called. It had been over a year since our last real conversation, the one where he handed me a gift card instead of support. I saw his name flash on my phone and nearly let it go to voicemail, but I didn't. Something inside me told me to listen. "Claire," he said, his voice flatter than usual. "Hey, weird question, but do you guys do residential cleaning too?" I blinked. Sometimes I said carefully, "Why?" There was a long pause. "Well, I'm between places." "Kind of. My lease fell through and the new condo I'm moving into got delayed. I've been couch surfing, but I've got this temporary gig in Spokane. And I saw one of your vans yesterday. Thought maybe you had something." "Temporary work, I mean." I couldn't breathe for a second. Derek, the golden boy, Mr. Stocks and Loafers, asking me for a job. I didn't say anything right away. He rushed to fill the silence. "I mean, just until I land something else. I can do admin or like logistics. Whatever. I'm good with numbers. I swallowed hard. We don't have admin openings, I said. But we are hiring shift assistants, early mornings, mostly floor care and post-construction cleanup. Another pause. Oh, he said. Like, actual cleaning. Yes, I said. Like, actual cleaning. Another beat of silence. Then I'll take it. I scheduled him for an onboarding shift the following Monday. Ethan raised an eyebrow when I told him. You serious? I nodded. Let him work, and he did. At 5:45 a.m., sharp Derek walked into our supply garage in khakis and a zip-up vest. He looked out of place, pale, uncertain, like a man entering a world he never imagined himself in. Luis handed him a mop. Darla didn't say a word, just pointed him to the checklist. He spent the morning hauling trash, scrubbing baseboards, and wiping glass partitions until his arms trembled. He never complained, not once. He didn't say much during breaks, but he showed up the next day. And the day after that. Maybe it was humility. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was both. But something about him was different, and I was different too. A year ago, I would have killed to prove myself to him, to get his approval, to make him say, "Wow, Claire, I was wrong." Now I didn't need any of that, because I knew who I was. I was Claire Bennett, co-founder of Everclean Solutions, a company built from grit, failure, and unshakable belief in the value of hard work. I'd married a janitor, and together we were building an empire. There's something beautiful about rock bottom. Not the pain of it, obviously. Not the humiliation or exhaustion, or nights you fall asleep wondering if your life is a mistake. No, the beauty comes after. When your back is against the wall and you realize you've got nothing left to prove to anyone. That's when you build. Not from ego, not from pride, but from purpose. That's what happened next. With Derek working shifts under our supervision, something in me shifted. The old part of me, the part that used to flinch at judgment, that still winced at my mom's disapproval, or worried about how my LinkedIn profile looked to strangers, that part went quiet. In its place was something stronger, sharper, and very, very focused. We weren't just surviving anymore. We had the chance to design something, a real company, one that could grow beyond us, one that could rewrite the rules of how cleaning work was viewed in the professional world. I sat Ethan down that Sunday morning at our tiny kitchen table and said, "We need to stop thinking like a mom and pop shop. We need systems, branding, culture, a real structure." He sipped his coffee slowly. "You've been watching those business YouTubers again, haven't you?" "Shut up," I said, grinning. "Yes. And also, hear me out." I pitched him the next phase of Everclean Solutions. We would rebrand more than a cleaning company. We'd be Environment First Sanitation, specializing in eco-forward commercial cleaning with packages tailored to startup offices, medical buildings, and educational campuses. We'd integrate scheduling and communication into an app, giving clients real-time service updates. Cleaning crews could upload before and after photos. Managers could request custom services via QR code tags in restrooms and break rooms. It would be transparent, efficient, and scalable. Ethan blinked at me, then nodded slowly. "Let's do it." The first thing we did was sit down with Darla and Luis and ask them everything: what slowed them down, what tools they wished they had, what made clients happy or annoyed. They told us things we never would have seen from a manager's seat. We raised their wages, bought better vacuums, added paid breaks to every shift, created a referral bonus for staff. And it worked. Turnover dropped, morale soared. Our tiny team was turning into a community. We also made new rules: no bleach, no ammonia, no artificial air fresheners. Every chemical had to be eco-certified. Ethan even started learning how to make our own cleaning concentrates, less packaging, better margins. Clients noticed. One co-working space manager told us, "Your team actually feels like they care. Most cleaners just show up, rush through, and leave. Yours remember our names." That was Ethan's doing. He made it a policy: leave a space better than you found it, and leave people better too. And then, just as we were getting our rhythm, Derek pulled me aside after his Friday shift. He looked tired, not just physically, worn out in a way I didn't expect from someone like him. "Hey," he said, I just wanted to say thank you for not turning me away, for giving me the chance. I blinked. You're working hard. You earned it. He nodded, eyes cast down, then looked up and said something that caught me completely off guard. I used to think success was about money, suits, title on a business card. But this is the first job I've ever had where I actually sleep at night. That hit me like a brick. For all of Derek's polished arrogance, I had never once considered that he might have felt just as trapped in his old life as we did in ours. He kept working for us part-time, quietly, no complaints, no entitlement, just effort. And I stopped resenting him, not because he apologized, but because I no longer needed one. My validation didn't live in Derek's words anymore. It lived in what we were building. Soon, our client list doubled again. Word of mouth did more than any paid ads ever could. We hired 4 new cleaners and 1 admin assistant. I trained her myself. Ethan stopped doing supply runs and started managing hiring. We were no longer just cleaners with a dream. We were operators. The money wasn't wild, but it was steady. We opened a business savings account, qualified for our first line of credit, paid ourselves real salaries. And then something happened I never expected. My mom called. She wanted to schedule a cleaning for her school. Apparently, the district had slashed their janitorial budget and teachers were being asked to wipe down classrooms on their own time. I offered a discount. She refused. "We want to pay your full rate," she said. "You deserve it." I sat down after the call, tears rolling down my face. It wasn't because we'd gained a new client. It was because for the first time, my mom didn't see what we did as less than. She saw it as valuable. And I realized then that the real strategy we had unlocked wasn't just about logistics or branding or growth. It was about respect, changing how people saw cleaning, changing how people saw cleaners. And yes, that included changing how we saw ourselves. We weren't just running a company, we were rewriting our story. By the end of our second year, we were finally in a place where we could breathe, not just financially, emotionally too. We moved into a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom townhouse with real furniture, not Craigslist leftovers. We had a washer and dryer that actually worked, a pantry that wasn't just rice peanut butter and discount ramen. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Ethan started sleeping again. Not in the collapse of exhaustion way, but in the peaceful, chest-rising kind of way that comes when your body finally believes it's safe. I remember one night rolling over to see him passed out, mouth-open, arms sprawled like he'd been dropped from the sky, and I'd just watched him for a long time. Because this man, this so-called janitor, had built something extraordinary from nothing but grit, grief, and goodwill, and I'd been lucky enough to build it with him. Around that time, we hosted our first staff dinner. Nothing big, just a rented back room at a local diner and a home-printed Employee of the Month certificate that we gave to Darla, who accepted it like it was a Grammy. Luis brought his kids. Derek came too, surprisingly, in clean boots and a button-down shirt I think he borrowed from someone. We all sat around mismatched tables, passing coleslaw and cornbread, talking shop, laughing at inside jokes about mop handles and drain clogs, and for the first time I looked around and saw more than employees. I saw a team. I saw people who weren't just working to survive, they were working to build something together. It was during that dinner that I told Ethan I wanted to expand. Not just more clients, I said. I'm talking systems, training manuals, licensing the model, franchising down the line. What we've built, it could work anywhere. He nodded slowly, chewing on a forkful of potato salad. Yeah, he said. It could. It was scary thinking that big, but also thrilling. We set goals: 10 more contracts by the end of the year, 1 more full-time manager, and a small warehouse space for inventory and dispatch. I reached out to a local community college to build a paid internship program for custodial apprentices. Ethan started meeting with a consultant to figure out how to streamline our supply chain. And then, one afternoon out of nowhere, Derek sent me a text. "I have something I need to tell you. Can we meet?" We met at a local coffee shop. He looked nervous, more so than I'd ever seen him. And this was a man who once gave a keynote speech to 100 investors. He pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a resume, his resume. "I want to apply for a permanent role," he said quietly. "Not just cleaning. I want in. For real." I didn't respond at first, because here was the man who used to mock our dream now asking to be part of it. And not because he had to, but because he believed in it. What changed, I asked. Derek looked down, then back at me. You, he said. You changed. I watched you build this thing from the dirt. I used to think I was better than you because of a paycheck, but the truth is I've never respected anyone more than I respect you and Ethan. I stared at him for a long time. Then I smiled. We're not hiring in leadership right now, I said, half teasing. He grinned back. I'll start where I started. You just say the word. We shook hands. Later that night, I told Ethan. You really think he's in this for the long haul? He asked. I shrugged. I think he's finally learning what we've known all along. Ethan raised an eyebrow, which is that some of the most powerful people in the world wear gloves and carry spray bottles. And it was true, because what we'd built wasn't about mops or marble floors. It was about restoring dignity to the kind of work that made every office, every home, every school function. It was about taking the overlooked and turning it into a legacy. And if Derek was ready to join us in that mission, really join us, then there was room for him too, as long as he didn't mind getting his hands dirty. By the end of that quarter, we hit all our growth targets. We took a tiny week-long vacation, the first since our wedding. Just a cabin by the lake, no phones, no meetings, just books, tea, and the soft sound of Ethan fixing the cabin's wobbly screen door because he couldn't help himself. I remember sitting on the deck watching the sun set over the water and thinking, this is what success feels like. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet, steady peace, and the unshakable knowledge that I had married not a janitor, but a man who built empires from floors nobody else wanted to touch. It was fitting, really, that the final confrontation didn't come with yelling or slammed doors. No melodrama, no speeches. Just Derek standing awkwardly in our new office clipboard and hand dust on his boots, humility in his posture as my parents walked in. Yes, my parents. They had come to visit for the first time since we'd opened our downtown headquarters, a modest space with 2 shared desks, a whiteboard wall covered in goals, and shelves of carefully labeled supplies. Nothing fancy. But to us, it was a throne room. My mom and dad had decided to drop by after a conference in town. They hadn't been overly critical over the past year, but they hadn't exactly asked questions either. There was still a quiet wall between us made of old doubts and unspoken worries. But now here they were, in person, standing in the middle of what Ethan and I had bled to build. I walked them through the operations room, showed them the dispatch board, the training modules, the client folders. Mom ran a hand over one of our ever-clean uniforms hanging on a rack and smiled softly. It looks real, she said. It is real, I replied. Then, of course, Derek came around the corner holding a restock sheet. Oh, he said, freezing mid-step. Hey, Aunt Judy? Uncle Rick? My parents blinked. Derek, my dad said. Are you visiting? Derek chuckled. Not exactly. There was a pause. He looked at me. I gave a small nod. Derek squared his shoulders. I work here now. My mom blinked. You're working for Claire? He didn't flinch. Yep, she's the boss. I watched my mother process that this son of her sister who once mocked my marriage and job and husband now wearing a cleaning badge with my company's logo on it. I expected discomfort, awkward silence, maybe even tension. Instead, my dad grinned. Well, I'll be damned. And my mom, who had once said Ethan was just a janitor, looked around the room, then at me, and nodded slowly. You did it, she said softly. You really did. I didn't reply. I just smiled, because I didn't need a big emotional apology anymore. I didn't need them to say we were wrong or you were right. The proof was in the floors, the walls, the paycheck stubs, the people who showed up every day to do the work and were proud of it. After they left, Derek stayed behind and helped Ethan load equipment into the van. I stood watching them from the doorway, my husband and my cousin. Once opposites in every way, now bound by shared effort and mutual respect. Later, Derek walked over, hands in his pockets, a bit of grease on his cheek. Hey, he said. I meant to say thank you. Again, I nodded. You're earning it. Every day. He smiled. Still feel weird about calling you boss, though. You could try CEO, I teased. He laughed, and then, more quietly, he said, I used to think I knew what power looked like. Now I think maybe it's about being the one who chooses to clean up the mess no one else sees. I paused. That's exactly it, I said. And we stood there, two cousins who had once represented everything the other resented, now co-workers, under a banner of hard work and quiet redemption. As he walked back to his truck, Ethan came up behind me, arm slipping around my waist. "He's changed," Ethan said. "So have we," I replied. We stood there side by side, looking at our little building with the Everclean sign above the door, and I thought not for the first time that the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, clean. It's strange how something that once felt like a fight for survival can evolve into a source of deep, grounding pride. That's what Everclean has become. Not just a company, not just our second chance, but our home. And maybe the most satisfying part. It's not about proving people wrong anymore. It's about proving us right. We didn't just build a business, we built a new narrative. One where cleaning work isn't something you do until something better comes along, but something that is better. Something with integrity, purpose, respect. These days, when I tell people what I do, I say it plainly. I run an environmental cleaning company. We prioritize dignity, efficiency, and sustainability. And I say it with pride. We've grown, slowly, responsibly. We now service over 40 businesses across Spokane and are branching into neighboring towns. We built a mentorship program that helps people re-entering the workforce, formerly incarcerated individuals, single parents, veterans learn the trade and earn stable, fair-paying jobs. We have a team of 19 souls who clock in, clock out, and know that their work matters. Darla was promoted to field supervisor last month. Luis now trains all our new hires. Derek is handling internal logistics and supply ordering, and he's shockingly good at it. He even redesigned our restock sheets, adding color-coded alerts I never would have thought of. My parents. They're now two of our loudest cheerleaders. My mom hands out our flyers at teacher events. My dad brags about us to his golf buddies. They don't talk about just a janitor anymore. They talk about the cleaning company our daughter built from nothing. And Ethan, my Ethan, he's no longer just the man I married in a cheap gray vest under skeptical stares. He's now the co-founder of a growing business, the heart of our operations, the one our employees go to when something breaks, when someone's crying, when there's a mess that needs fixing, metaphorical or otherwise. He never wanted recognition, but last week at a local business awards dinner, he stood under soft lights in a too-small suit holding a plaque that said, "Workforce Impact Leader of the Year." He just stood there smiling like he'd never expected this part of the story. And maybe he hadn't, but I had. Because from the first time I saw Ethan mop a floor with care, real care, I knew that whatever we built together wouldn't be ordinary. It would be honest, humble, unshakably strong, like him. After the event, we drove home in our battered van. Yes, we still keep it around, and he turned to me at a stoplight, that tired but happy smile on his face. "Still think marrying a janitor was a good idea?" he asked. I reached over, laced my fingers with his. "No," I said, half grinning. "I think it was the best idea I ever had. Because I didn't just marry a janitor, I married a man with calloused hands and a clean heart. And together we turned mops and buckets into blueprints and legacy. Now, when people ask me how we made it work, I don't talk about the business model or the marketing or even the logistics. I just say this. We showed up when no one believed we could. We got our hands dirty when others turned their noses up. We never stopped cleaning even when life got messier than we thought possible. And now they work for us. And we walk through our empire quietly, with soft-soled shoes, disinfectant in hand, and heads held high.